I gave my son everything, my house, my savings, even the bakery my late husband and I built with love. And how did he repay me? By having me dragged out of my home in handcuffs, accused of crimes I never committed. But fate has a strange way of turning. Because the same streets he once made me walk in shame are now the place where he sleeps alone and forgotten. I never imagined life could change so quickly and so painfully. After my husband passed away, the world around me felt like it was falling apart. We had built a life together, brick by brick, filled with memories, laughter, and love. Our small bakery was not just a business, it was our dream, something we poured our hearts into. And our cozy home in Evanston was where we had raised our son, Michael. But now all that felt fragile, like sand slipping through my fingers. Grief overwhelmed me, and loneliness settled in my heart. I knew I needed help, someone to support me through this dark time. That's when I decided to move in with Michael and his wife, Emily. They had a nice home in suburban Chicago, not far from the bakery or our old neighborhood. I trusted them completely. Michael was my son, after all. I believed family would stand by me, especially when I was most vulnerable. So I handed over everything. The house, the bakery, the savings in the local bank, I gave it all to them. I thought it was the right thing to do. I wanted to make their lives easier, to secure our family's future. I believed that by placing my trust in them, I was protecting the legacy my husband and I had built. Every day, I tried to stay hopeful. I told myself that family is a bond stronger than anything else. I imagined peaceful evenings, laughter filling the rooms, and the bakery's sweet smell welcoming customers just like before. I dreamed of quiet moments spent with Michael and Emily, watching them succeed, knowing I had helped. But beneath that hope, there was a faint whisper of unease. Sometimes, I caught fleeting looks between Michael and Emily, hurried, tense conversations behind closed doors. Sometimes I noticed Michael's restless behavior, as if he carried a burden I couldn't understand. Still, I pushed those feelings aside. I wanted to believe in the good. I wanted to believe in family. I never thought I'd be betrayed by the very blood that ran through my veins. At first, everything seemed so normal, too normal, maybe. But slowly, day by day, I started noticing little things that didn't quite feel right. It wasn't anything glaring or obvious. Just quiet moments, tiny cracks in the calm surface of our home that made my heart tighten even though I couldn't explain why. Michael, my son, the boy I raised with so much love, began acting different. Not openly angry or rude, but restless, impatient in ways that unsettled me. One evening, I saw him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the bakery's ledger with a hard look in his eyes. He sighed sharply when I asked if he was okay, brushing it off with a quick, "Just tired, Mom." Don't worry. But it wasn't just tiredness. I noticed how he started checking the bank statements more often than usual. His phone calls became secretive. He'd step into another room, lowering his voice so I couldn't hear. Sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he would clench his jaw and glare at something on his screen, his fingers tapping nervously. One afternoon, I caught him flipping through the papers of the house deed. "Michael, what are you looking for?" I asked casually. He glanced up, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing important, just making sure everything's in order," he said, but there was a sharp edge to his tone that made me swallow hard. And Emily, she was different too. My sweet daughter-in-law, who once laughed warmly at family dinners, was now a shadow of herself. She smiled less, spoke softly, and avoided any eye contact that lasted more than a moment. After meals, she'd disappear into her room, closing the door quietly behind her, leaving a heavy silence that filled the house. One night, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the floor. "Emily, are you okay?" I asked gently. She looked up, eyes glassy with unshed tears, but quickly wiped them away. "I'm fine, really," she whispered, forcing a smile that broke my heart. "Just tired." But I saw it. the silent suffering she carried inside her, the weight she bore without complaint. I wanted to reach out, to ask what was wrong, but she always brushed me off. Maybe she was afraid, or maybe she didn't want to burden me. Or perhaps she didn't trust that anyone would understand. Through it all, I stayed hopeful, holding on to the belief that my family loved me. I told myself these were just hard times, stress from running the bakery, adjusting to new roles, the grief of my husband's passing. I convinced myself that everything would get better, that these strange feelings were just passing shadows. But deep down, I had no idea how wrong I was. Those quiet moments, those restless glances and trembling hands, they were the first signs of a storm brewing inside our home. A storm I never saw coming. I had no clue that behind those closed doors, my own blood was planting the seeds of a betrayal so cruel, so unforgivable, that it would break my heart and turn my world upside down. That morning started like any other, but I had no idea it would change my life forever. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, when I heard a firm knock on the door. Not the gentle tap I was used to from Michael or Emily, but a harsh, commanding rap that made my heart skip. I opened it, and there stood two police officers, faces serious and unyielding. "Mrs. Thompson?" one asked. "Yes, I'm she," I said, trying to steady my trembling voice. "We have a warrant for your arrest," the other officer said coldly. My stomach dropped. "Arrest? What? For what?" I asked, disbelief clouding my mind. They handed me the papers. "Charges of harassment and financial fraud filed by your son, Michael." "No, this can't be. Michael wouldn't. This is a mistake," I exclaimed, desperation rising. "He's my son. How could he do this?" The officers remained silent. One gently said, "You have the right to remain silent, Mrs. Thompson. Please come with us." I was stunned, the room spinning. My neighbors gathered at their windows, whispering and staring as I was led out of my own home in handcuffs. I wanted to scream, to tell them it wasn't true, but the words caught in my throat. "Mom, please," I heard Michael's voice outside, but it wasn't pleading, it was cold and distant. I didn't respond. At the police station, the sterile environment crushed me. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead as they booked me, stripped of all dignity. Then came the jail, the cold metal bars, the echoing clanks of iron doors, the chilling silence broken only by distant sobs and murmurs. In my tiny cell, the air was thick with despair. I sat on the hard bench, my knees trembling, my hands clenched tightly. Tears welled up, but I forced myself to hold them back. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real. It can't be real. My Michael would never do this." But deep down, I knew the truth was far darker than I wanted to admit. Alone and scared, I hugged my knees, feeling more isolated than ever before. The cold walls closed in, and I wondered if I'd ever see my home again. The days inside that bleak, cold cell were some of the darkest I had ever known. The walls seemed to press in on me, and the endless hours stretched like an ocean of despair. Every night, I lay on the hard bench, clutching my thin blanket, trying not to cry. I kept asking myself, how did my own son betray me like this? The thought was unbearable. One afternoon, as the gray light filtered through the barred window, the heavy iron door clanged open. A woman was escorted in, a gentle-looking lady, maybe in her early 50s, with kind eyes full of concern. She paused for a moment, scanning the rows of metal benches, then her gaze settled on me. "Mrs. Thompson?" she said softly, almost hesitantly. I looked up, surprised to hear a kind voice. "Yes, that's me." She smiled sadly and took a step closer. "I'm Margaret. I used to work with you at the bakery years ago. I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry to see you here." Tears welled up and blurred my vision. "Margaret, I never thought it would come to this. My own son." My voice broke, choked with pain. Margaret reached out, gently squeezing my hand. "I can't imagine the pain you're feeling, but you're not alone. My son, David, he's a lawyer now. He's good, very good. I'm going to speak to him first thing tomorrow morning. I promise you, we'll try everything to get you out. Her words felt like a soft blanket wrapping around my shattered heart. For the first time since the arrest, a faint spark of hope flickered inside me. That night, I lay awake, thinking about what Margaret said. I pictured her son, a man I had never met, standing up for me. It was hard to believe, but something about her kindness gave me strength. The next morning, the jail guards led me through the cold, echoing corridors again. My heart pounded in my chest as the iron door swung open. There, standing beside Margaret, was a tall man with calm, steady eyes and an aura of quiet confidence. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is David," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "My mother told me everything. I want you to know, I'm going to fight for you." I reached out my hand, trembling, and he shook it warmly. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't even know where to start." David smiled kindly. "You don't have to explain everything right now. I'll review the case, gather the facts, and do everything I can. We'll take this step by step." Margaret smiled proudly. "You're not alone anymore. We're here for you." David glanced around the cold room. "I know this place is hard, but don't lose hope. We'll work together and get you through this." The kindness in their eyes gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks, a hope. I felt a warmth spreading inside me, like the first sunlight breaking through the darkest night. As they left, I whispered quietly to myself, maybe justice isn't lost after all. Back home, after my release on bail, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. My hands still trembled from the trauma of the jail cell, and the echoes of that cold place lingered in my ears. But David, steady, determined David, had no time for sorrow. He dove headfirst into the legal mess Michael had created, and I watched in awe as this young man, whom I remembered as a shy, polite boy in my bakery, transformed into a lion in a courtroom suit. One afternoon, I sat at David's downtown office. The windows overlooked the bustle of Chicago, but all I could focus on was the mountain of files spread across the desk. David looked up from a forged deed with a furrowed brow. "He didn't just sign your name. He replicated your handwriting, even faked a notary stamp." I blinked slowly. "He really went that far?" He nodded grimly. "He planned this. Carefully. These weren't spur-of-the-moment decisions. Your son built a whole illusion, documents showing he inherited the bakery, the house. Look at this." He handed me a paper. "This is supposed to be from your bank, authorizing the transfer of your savings. The account number doesn't even match." I stared at the page, my heart breaking all over again. I trusted him. I gave him everything. I thought I was protecting our family. David sat beside me, his voice softer now. "You were a mother. You loved your son. That's not a crime. What he did, that's the betrayal." Just then, his mother, Mrs. Gonzalez, entered with a tray of tea and cookies. "You both need a break. Eat something." I smiled weakly. "Still making your famous butter cookies?" She chuckled and set the tray down. "And I still remember how you stayed late to help me clean that day when I slipped and couldn't mop. You were the only one who cared." David's voice carried quiet pride. "She's the reason I went into law, Mom. People like her shouldn't suffer in silence." Mrs. Gonzalez touched my shoulder. "My son's going to make this right." The warmth in that tiny gesture, it almost made me cry. David stood, grabbing his laptop. "We're filing the full case this week. Fraud, forgery, emotional distress, the works. And I'm not going to stop until you have your house, your bakery, and your name back." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the quiet of the guest room they'd prepared for me and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed, a text from Emily. "Emily, I saw the news. I'm so sorry. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. If there's anything I can do, I want to help." I stared at her message for a long time. Even she hadn't known how deep Michael's betrayal ran. The next morning, David and I sat side by side again, building the case. Did he ever threaten you, manipulate you into signing something? David asked, fingers flying over his keyboard. I hesitated. He used to say things like, "Mom, let me take care of the paperwork. You're not young anymore." And if I asked too many questions, he'd get defensive. Once, he even yelled, "Why don't you trust your own son?" David paused, nodded slowly. That's coercion. Subtle, but it paints the picture. Later, we went to the bank. The branch manager pulled up the account history and frowned. "These signatures don't match," she said, holding two forms side by side. "And the authorization came from an email that doesn't belong to Mrs. Thompson." David looked at me. There. That's another piece of evidence. Everywhere we turned, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The bakery's new lease forged in Michael's name, invoices to vendors with altered headers, even a fake transfer of ownership filed at the county office. But with every discovery, a new wave of emotion hit me. I wasn't just fighting for assets. I was fighting for my identity, my dignity, my sanity. "Do you think he'll fight back?" I asked one day, my voice barely above a whisper. David didn't hesitate. "He'll try. But lies don't hold up in court forever. Especially not against the truth we've got." We prepared for the court filing day like soldiers before battle. David sat with me, reviewing every document, every angle of the case. "This is more than just legal paperwork," he said. "This is your story. We're going to tell it the right way." I looked at him, heart full of gratitude. "Why are you doing all this for me, David?" He smiled, eyes warm. "Because you were there for my mom when no one else was. Because no mother deserves what you've been through. And because it's the right thing to do." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a fight to reclaim my life. It was a fight for every parent who trusted too deeply, every woman silenced by betrayal, and every truth buried under a lie. And I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The courtroom doors opened with a dull creak, and the sound echoed like thunder in my ears. My palms were damp. My heart pounded like a war drum. I had never been in a courtroom before, never imagined I'd stand in one accused by my own son. As I took my seat beside David, I noticed how polished everything looked, the oak benches, the American flag standing proud behind the judge's chair, the sound of hushed voices mixing with the tapping of heels on the tiled floor. My eyes drifted across the room and landed on Michael. He looked calm, too calm. He wore a tailored suit, his hair slicked neatly, his expression unreadable. For a second, I saw a flicker of the boy I once raised, the boy who used to run into my arms after school, who used to ask for one more cookie after dinner. But then he turned away, like I was nothing. David leaned over and whispered, "Whatever happens today, stay strong. Let the truth speak." I gave a soft nod, holding back tears. I wasn't sure if I had enough strength left in me, but I knew this was the moment. This was where my pain had to speak louder than my silence. The judge entered, an older woman named Judge Herrera, known for her sharpness and fairness. She looked over her glasses as she sat down and banged the gavel. "Court is now in session for the case of Thompson versus Thompson." The court clerk read the charges, and with each word, my heart sank deeper. Fraud, harassment, property theft. David stood, straightening his jacket, and began his opening statement. "Your Honor, we are here today not just to present evidence, but to restore dignity. My client, Mrs. Elaine Thompson, stands wrongly accused by her own son. A son who, driven by greed, fabricated lies, forged documents, and misused the trust a mother gave her child. Today, we will show the court the truth behind these claims." Michael's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is an emotional manipulation." The judge raised her hand. "Noted. Mr. Rivera, continue, but stay focused on the facts." David nodded. "The facts are simple. Mrs. Thompson never transferred ownership of her home or business willingly. The signatures were forged, the documents tampered. And the witnesses? We'll let the court decide." The prosecution began with their first witness, a man named Greg, someone who had once worked briefly at our bakery. I remember her saying she was tired, he testified. She said she wanted to hand everything over to Michael and rest. David stood up calmly. Mr. Wallace, how long did you work at the bakery? About 3 weeks, I think. David smiled faintly. And you had such an intimate conversation in those 3 weeks? Greg shifted in his seat. Well, not exactly intimate. So you're saying within 3 weeks, the owner of the bakery told you her retirement plans in detail? No, I just overheard. David held up a time card. Is it true you were fired for not showing up on weekends? Greg's face paled. Yes. No further questions. Next came the notary, a woman named Donna, who had allegedly witnessed me signing over the property. David walked up to her slowly, holding a document. Miss Rowe, is this your stamp? Yes, she replied firmly. And your license? She handed it to the court clerk. David took one look and turned to the judge. Your Honor, the document she notarized is dated July 4th of last year. According to the state registry, her notary commission expired 2 months earlier. This notarization is illegal. Gasps echoed in the room. Donna looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge frowned deeply. Michael's lawyer tried to recover. Even if there was a technical issue, the intention was there. David slammed a second set of papers down. Let's talk intention. These emails were recovered from Mr. Michael Thompson's account. In them, he writes to a financial advisor, once Mom's out of the way, the bakery is all mine. The courtroom fell silent. I closed my eyes as a tear rolled down my cheek. I couldn't believe my son would put that in writing. Judge Herrera turned to Michael. Mr. Thompson, do you deny writing these emails? Michael looked up, sweat forming on his brow. I don't recall writing them. David stepped forward again. We also have a forensic IT expert who will testify that the emails were sent from Mr. Thompson's home IP address and were never deleted, just archived. The judge gave a slow nod. Bring the expert forward. As the day wore on, the evidence stacked higher and higher against Michael. His lawyer looked increasingly rattled. David was methodical, composed, and unrelenting. And then, it was my turn. David helped me to the stand. My legs trembled as I walked, but my heart was stronger now. I raised my right hand, took the oath, and sat. David stood before me with gentle eyes. Mrs. Thompson, he said softly, can you tell the court what kind of relationship you had with your son before this incident? I took a shaky breath. He was everything to me. After my husband passed away, I lived with him, gave him everything I had, the house, the business, the savings. I thought he would take care of it. Of me. His voice dropped. And did you ever sign a document transferring ownership of your assets to him? No. Never. I trusted him. I never imagined he would take my trust and twist it into something so cruel. He stepped back, letting my words settle. Michael's lawyer rose, ready to attack. Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true that you were having memory problems at the time? I blinked. Excuse me, isn't it possible that you thought you didn't sign something, but you did? David jumped up. Objection. Speculative and disrespectful. The judge looked at the prosecutor with disdain. Watch your tone, counselor. The cross-examination ended quickly after that. The prosecution was running out of steam. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Emily. She asked to speak. The judge allowed it. She walked to the stand, trembling but determined. My name is Emily Thompson, she began, and I'm Michael's wife. Or, I was. The courtroom held its breath. I watched this unfold in silence, and I can't stay quiet anymore. Michael told me what he was doing, how he planned to take the business, the house. He asked me to lie for him. I didn't. That's why we stopped talking. That's why I moved into the guest room. I was scared, but I knew this day would come. My heart shattered all over again. The judge looked at her, then at Michael. Do you wish to cross-examine your wife? Michael shook his head. I saw something I never expected in his eyes, fear, shame. The courtroom fell quiet as the judge asked everyone to rise. We will recess for today. Testimonies will continue tomorrow. As I stepped down from the witness stand, David caught my arm gently. You were incredible. I gave him a tearful smile. You gave me the strength. Outside, the sky had turned gray and rain began to fall. But I didn't mind, because for the first time in a long while, it wasn't falling inside me anymore. The house was too quiet. Emily sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, no longer the master bedroom she once shared with Michael. The room felt like a waiting station, a place that wasn't home, but wasn't yet a departure either. Her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her sweater, her thoughts spiraling. Downstairs, Michael was watching TV, laughing at some late-night comedy show as if nothing in the world had happened. As if he hadn't just tried to destroy his own mother. As if she hadn't stood in court and heard the truth explode like glass shattering in a silent room. She still remembered the way Elaine's voice trembled on the witness stand, the way her hands gripped the rail as she answered the judge's questions. I gave him everything, because he was my son. I never imagined he'd treat me like a burden, like a thief. It broke something in Emily that day. Something that had been holding on, quietly hoping that Michael would come to his senses. That maybe, just maybe, he would see the damage he'd done, not just to his mother, but to her. Instead, she watched him sit there, cold, smug, untouched by pain or remorse. Emily got up and walked slowly toward the small dresser in the corner. She opened the top drawer and began to pack. A pair of jeans. A few shirts. Her grandmother's scarf. A quiet knock came at the door. It was Michael. Hey, he said casually, leaning on the doorframe. What are you doing? Emily kept her eyes on the drawer. Packing. For what? We're not going anywhere, he said with a slight smirk. She turned around. Her face calm, but her eyes were like steel. No, you're not going anywhere. But I am. Michael's smile faded. Emily, don't be ridiculous. Ridiculous. Her voice cracked slightly but carried force. I stood by you while you lied. While you turned into someone I don't even recognize. I kept telling myself you were stressed, or scared, or confused. But you're none of those things. You're cruel. He stepped closer, his tone sharp. You're not going to walk out on me, Emily. Not after everything. She looked at him, tears pooling but not falling. You tried to destroy your own mother, Michael. You didn't just lie in court, you dragged her through hell. You made me lie to myself every single day, pretending I didn't see the monster you were becoming. Michael scoffed. She deserved it. That woman never appreciated me. She gave everything to me like it was a gift, then used it against me every chance she got. You think she's innocent. Emily took a breath, calming the tremor in her voice. She gave you her house, her business, her savings. And what did you give her in return? A jail cell. Michael's voice turned low. Dangerous. You're going to regret this. Emily didn't flinch. Maybe, but not more than I'll regret staying. With that, she zipped her suitcase, walked past him, and headed downstairs. He followed her. Where will you go? You've got nothing without me. She stopped at the front door. I have more than you ever will. I have self-respect. And I still have people who care about me not because they want something from me, but because they know who I really am. The cab pulled into the driveway. She stepped outside, the cold Chicago air biting her cheeks, but it felt cleaner than any breath she'd taken inside that house in years. 2 days later, Emily sat across from Elaine in a small, cozy cafe on the corner of North Clark Street. Snowflakes drifted lazily outside the frosted windows. Elaine was sipping hot chamomile tea, her hands still visibly shaky from the stress of the trial. I didn't expect to see you again so soon, Elaine said softly, her voice gentle but tired. I needed to, Emily replied, wrapping her fingers around her own mug. I needed to say thank you, and I needed to say I'm sorry. Elaine looked up, confused. For what? For staying silent, Emily said, her voice breaking. I knew things were going wrong. I saw the signs, but I was too scared. I thought if I just stayed quiet, things would fix themselves. But they didn't. And you paid the price for it. Elaine reached across the table and took her hand. You were trying to survive, Emily. That house. Michael, it wasn't easy for any of us. You leaving took more courage than you think. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I filed for divorce. Elaine smiled, small, but real. Good. I don't know where life goes from here, Emily admitted, wiping her eyes. I don't have much. You have your integrity, Elaine said gently. You have peace. And you have people who care about you. Emily looked up, her voice barely a whisper. Like you. Elaine nodded. Like me. They sat there, hands clasped, two women bound by pain and healing. And outside, for the first time in what felt like forever, the sun broke gently through the snow clouds. The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning. Elaine Harper sat on the wooden bench, her fingers tightly clasped together in her lap. Her knuckles were white, her palms slightly trembling. David sat beside her, calm but focused, flipping through the last few documents in his folder. His mother sat on the other side, gently rubbing Elaine's back, as if she were her own daughter. You don't need to worry, David whispered gently. We did everything right. Elaine looked at him with tired eyes. I never thought I'd live to see this day. All I wanted was a quiet life with my family. I never imagined I'd be here, fighting my own son in court. I know, David said, his voice warm but steady. But you stood up. You fought. And now it's time for justice to do its part. As the judge entered, the room stood in silence. The shuffle of papers, the tapping of shoes, and even the hum of the overhead lights faded into the background as everyone turned to face the bench. Michael Harper sat across the room, smug, arms folded. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Michael just gave a half shrug, like this was just another inconvenience. He glanced at his mother, Elaine, and smirked. That look broke something inside her. She had raised him, held his hand when he was sick, sang lullabies to him at night. She remembered his tiny fingers wrapped around hers when he was 5, afraid of thunderstorms. And now this? The judge cleared his throat and began reading the verdict. This court has reviewed all the evidence presented: bank statements, title deeds, business records, and sworn testimonies. It is the conclusion of this court that the accusations made by the defendant, Michael Harper, were false and malicious. Elaine felt her breath catch in her throat. The judge continued. The forged documents submitted by Mr. Harper, as well as the coerced statements from unreliable witnesses, have been thoroughly debunked by the plaintiff's legal team. This court acknowledges the rightful ownership of the Evanston residence, Harper's Bakery, and the financial assets in question to Mrs. Elaine Harper. Michael stood up abruptly. This is nonsense. She manipulated all of you. She gave me everything, and now she's trying to play the victim. Mr. Harper, the judge's voice echoed sharply. You are out of order. Sit down. No. She's a liar. Michael shouted, his voice cracking. This isn't over. A bailiff stepped forward. Sir, please. Michael's lawyer whispered harshly, sit down before you're held in contempt. Reluctantly, Michael dropped back into his seat, glaring at Elaine with fury burning in his eyes. The judge turned back to Elaine. Mrs. Harper, the court returns full ownership of your house, your business, and your financial accounts to you, effective immediately. Elaine's eyes welled up. She wasn't someone who cried easily, but this moment, this truth, broke the dam that months of betrayal had built inside her. David turned to her, voice soft. You did it. Elaine let out a shaky laugh, tears slipping down her cheeks. No, David, we did it. You believed in me when no one else did. David's mother took Elaine's hand, her own eyes wet. You believed in me first, remember? You gave me a job when I had nothing. You saved me and my son. This is just coming full circle. Elaine could barely speak. Her voice cracked. I thought I lost everything, but now I've been given a second chance." As they left the courtroom, the sun had broken through the gray clouds. It poured in through the courthouse windows as if the sky itself was celebrating. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Reporters tried to ask questions, cameras clicked, but David gently guided Elaine through them. That evening, they returned to Evanston. The key felt unfamiliar in her hand as she approached the front door of her house, but it turned smoothly, like the house had been waiting for her. She stepped inside. Everything was as it had been left, but somehow it felt different. Warmer. Real. David's mother followed her in and gasped. "You're home." Elaine nodded. "Yes." Finally, they walked to the back of the house, into the kitchen where the window overlooked her old garden. "I used to grow marigolds there," Elaine said softly. Michael hated the smell. He always asked me to dig them out. "Maybe now it's time to plant them again," David's mother replied with a gentle smile. The next morning, Elaine visited her bakery. It had been closed for weeks, dust-covered counters, chairs stacked in the corners, the aroma of yeast long gone. But her name still hung proudly above the counter, Harper's Bakery. David and his mother stood behind her. "You ready to bring it back to life?" he asked. Elaine looked around. The machines, the recipe cards, the familiar old radio. Her memories lingered in every corner. "Yes," she said with certainty. "And this time, I won't let anyone take it from me." Later that week, word got around town about the court verdict. Neighbors started coming in, bringing flowers and hugs. Old customers peeked through the bakery door, asking when it would reopen. And then, she saw him. Michael, sitting on the curb across the street, disheveled, alone, his eyes hollow. For a moment, Elaine's heart twisted. She looked at her son, her flesh and blood, reduced to a stranger. But there was no rage in her heart, only sorrow. David noticed her gaze. "Are you okay?" Elaine took a deep breath. "I don't hate him. I just pity him. He lost everything not because I took it, but because he gave it all up chasing more." David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than most people I know." Elaine looked out at her bakery, her home, and the people slowly coming back into her life. "I just want peace now," she said. "And maybe a little bit of happiness." The courtroom had emptied out, and justice had taken its final bow. The gavel's last echo still lingered in the walls, but outside that courthouse, a different kind of silence fell, one that wraps itself around defeat. Michael didn't speak. He didn't even flinch as the judge delivered the final ruling. Everything he tried to steal, his mother's house, her bakery, her savings, was lawfully hers again. The look in his eyes wasn't of rage anymore. It was emptiness. Cold, dry emptiness. Back at the house, his former home, Michael stood across the street that evening, watching as the lights inside flickered on. His mother was back where she belonged. The neighborhood he used to boast about now seemed miles away, even though he stood just across the sidewalk. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced with worn jeans and a hoodie that didn't fit quite right. He hadn't shaved in days, and his eyes had that sunken look of a man who had fallen too far, too fast. "Michael?" a voice said behind him. He turned around. It was Emily. She looked peaceful, confident, strong. Nothing like the quiet, nervous woman who used to keep her head down in that house. Her hair was tied back neatly, her purse on her shoulder, and divorce papers in her hand. "I came to drop off the signed papers," she said softly. "It's done." Michael swallowed hard. "You really went through with it?" She nodded. "You left me no choice." I thought you'd stay. I thought we'd get through this," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Emily's eyes filled with a mix of sadness and strength. "Get through what?" "You framed your own mother, Michael. You sent her to jail. You tried to destroy her just for money. Do you even hear how monstrous that sounds?" He looked away, ashamed. "I messed up. I don't know what I thought." She sighed. No, you knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think it would all come crashing down. There was a pause, thick with all the words left unsaid. Then she added, I hope you find your way back someday. But I won't be waiting. With that, Emily turned and walked away, heels clicking softly against the pavement. Michael watched her disappear into the night. Days passed, then weeks. Michael had no job, no house, and nowhere to go. Old friends had stopped answering his calls. Some blocked his number altogether. The bakery community, where his mother was once a respected figure, had heard everything. No one wanted to be associated with a man who falsely accused his own mother of fraud. He ended up near the very street his mother once trusted him with. The irony was cruel. On bitter cold nights, he slept under a thin blanket on a wooden bench just outside the bakery. The same bakery that once bore his family name now carried only hers. The neon sign glowed above his head, a constant reminder of what he had lost. One early morning, as he tried to get a bit of sleep, he heard familiar footsteps approaching. He opened one eye and saw her, his mother, walking toward the bakery, keys in hand. For a second, their eyes met. She stopped, just a few feet away. Michael, she said, voice steady. He sat up slowly, unsure whether to speak or hide. Ma. She raised her hand gently. No. Don't say anything. I don't need your apologies. I needed them when you lied. When you signed those papers. When you watched me get dragged out in handcuffs. I was scared, he muttered, his voice barely audible. No, she replied, her voice still calm but piercing. You were greedy. There was a pause. She looked at him sitting on the bench, shivering in the early morning air. Her eyes softened, but just a little. I'll never understand why you did it. But I won't let your shame ruin the rest of my life. I'm going to live with peace now. Without fear. Without you. And with that, she walked away, unlocking the bakery door and stepping inside. The scent of fresh bread and morning hope followed her in, leaving Michael outside, alone, cold, and drowning in the consequences of his own choices. He leaned back against the bench, looking up at the sky as dawn broke. For the first time, he truly felt the weight of everything he'd thrown away. The soft morning light spilled gently across the kitchen table, where she sat alone, fingers trembling slightly as she wrapped them around a warm cup of tea. The silence in the house was heavy, yet it was the kind of quiet that came after everything had been shattered and slowly pieced back together. Her mind wandered through the maze of memories, some bitter, some bittersweet, trying to make sense of all that had happened. How did it come to this? She whispered to herself, voice barely audible. How did my own son become a stranger who wanted to destroy me? The memories of the early days after her husband's death filled her heart with a strange ache. She remembered the warmth she had felt moving into Michael and Emily's home in Evanston, the hope she clung to tightly. I thought family was safe, she said quietly, tears threatening to fall. I gave them everything, my house, my bakery, our savings. I trusted them with all my heart. Just then, Emily's gentle voice echoed in her memory, from the day they had sat together in the kitchen, when Emily had confided in her quietly, eyes filled with sadness. Mom, I don't know how to say this, but Michael has changed. He's not the man I married, Emily had said, voice trembling. Sometimes I feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had smiled weakly then, wanting to believe everything would be all right, but deep down, she had felt a flicker of unease. The betrayal that followed was worse than any nightmare. The morning the police arrived was burned into her soul. Mom, please, it's not what it looks like, Michael had shouted as officers handcuffed her. But the cold eyes of the law didn't see the mother they knew. They only saw a suspect, a criminal. Dragged out in front of neighbors, humiliated beyond words. And then came the lonely nights in Cook County Jail, the cold metal bench, the harsh fluorescent lights, the echoes of footsteps and distant cries. She had felt utterly lost. But in that darkness, there was a light. David, the son of her old bakery friend, who had come to her rescue. "Mrs. Thompson, you're not alone," he had said softly during his jail visit. "I'm going to get you out of here. I promise." His kindness rekindled her hope and gave her the strength to fight back. As she sipped her tea now, she looked out the window and whispered, "Trust is precious, but it must be guarded carefully." Her voice grew stronger. "I learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the people you love can hurt you the most. But pain doesn't have to break you. It can make you stronger." She thought of Emily again and the courage it took for her to leave Michael. "I'm proud of you, Emily," she murmured. "You found your voice when you felt silenced." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of resolve. She stood, moving to the bakery's window, watching the neighborhood she had reclaimed with so much struggle and love. "I lost a lot," she said, voice steady. "But I gained something no one can take away: strength, wisdom, and the true meaning of family." The quiet room seemed to listen as she whispered softly, "I will move forward, with open eyes and a guarded heart, ready for whatever life brings next." Her story was far from over, but she was ready now. Stronger than ever before, the smell of freshly baked bread always took her back to those early days, the very beginning when the bakery was just a tiny, worn-down shop on a quiet street in Evanston. She remembered clearly how her husband's hands worked the dough with such care and strength, his laugh filling the small room like sunshine through the windows. "Mary, we're building more than just bread here," he used to say, wiping sweat from his forehead, eyes shining with hope. "We're building a legacy. One day, this bakery will be known for miles, a place where families come together, just like ours." She smiled softly at the memory, her eyes misting over. "You always believed in us, didn't you?" she whispered to herself, fingers tracing the worn wooden counter where they had shared so many moments. After her husband passed away, the bakery wasn't just a shop anymore, it became her lifeline. Every morning before dawn, she was the first to arrive, turning on the ovens, mixing the dough, preparing the shelves. Her hands, rough and cracked from years of kneading, moved automatically, but her heart was heavy with the weight of loss. One chilly morning, her old friend Linda stopped by. "Mary, you're working too hard. You should take a break," Linda said gently, concern in her eyes. Mary shook her head, forcing a small smile. "This bakery, it's all I have left of him. Every loaf, every pastry, it's like I'm holding onto a piece of him." Linda placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. "You've done amazing things here. Your husband would be so proud." Mary nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I just want to make sure it stays in the family. That one day, Michael and his wife understand what this place really means." Her husband's dream was her dream now, a fragile hope she guarded fiercely. The bakery was not just a business, it was the heartbeat of their family, a symbol of years of hard work, love, and sacrifice. She'd saved every penny, tucked away carefully in the local bank, imagining a peaceful future surrounded by those she loved. But deep down, beneath her quiet strength, she felt the weight of uncertainty creeping in, though she refused to let it show. This bakery was her legacy, and she would fight to protect it no matter what. Michael sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the weight of his frustrations pressing down on him like a heavy storm cloud. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside his mind, chaos raged. He stared blankly at the unopened bills stacked on the coffee table, each one a reminder that no matter how hard he tried, the money was never enough. The bakery his mother owned, once a symbol of family pride and hard work, had been struggling for months. The financial pressure was suffocating, and his dreams felt farther away than ever before. He rubbed his temples, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness swirl inside him. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," he whispered to the empty room. "Mom has everything, the house, the money, the business, and I'm stuck watching it all from the sidelines." Memories of earlier days haunted him. When his father had passed, Michael had promised to care for his mother, to protect her and the family legacy she and his father had built. At first, things seemed hopeful. But as time went on, that hope slowly faded. The relationship between him and his mother had turned cold, distant. Every conversation felt like a battle, every glance a silent accusation. "She never listens to me anymore," he thought bitterly. "It's like she's guarding her kingdom and I'm the enemy trying to steal her crown." He recalled last week's dinner, when he had tried to talk to her about expanding the bakery, to invest in new equipment or open a second location. But she had brushed him off, saying, "We need to be careful with money. This bakery is our family's legacy, Michael. I won't risk it on your reckless ideas." Her words, meant to be cautious, felt like chains tightening around his dreams. And then there was Emily, his wife, caught in the middle of a growing storm. He saw the way she flinched when his mother entered the room, the way her eyes grew sad and tired. She rarely spoke up, but Michael knew she suffered silently. Sometimes, late at night, he would hear her crying softly in the bedroom, a sound that tore at his heart and filled him with guilt. "I hate seeing her like this," he admitted quietly. "But what can I do? If I lose her too, I'm truly alone." The desperation clawed at him every day, twisting his thoughts and clouding his judgment. The bakery, the house, the savings, they all felt like symbols of a life he couldn't fully grasp or control. His mother held the reins tightly, and he was left feeling powerless, a mere spectator in his own family. "If I could just have control," he thought with a bitter edge, "maybe then they'd respect me. Maybe then I'd stop being invisible." The idea of taking charge consumed him, slowly eroding the boundaries between right and wrong. What started as frustration turned into resentment, and resentment into plans fueled by greed. He convinced himself that the only way forward was to claim what was rightfully his, even if it meant betraying the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. But deep down, beneath the anger and the bitterness, was a raw, aching fear. A fear of failure, of losing everything, his wife, his family, his future. That fear whispered to him in his darkest moments, urging him to fight back, to take control no matter the cost. "I don't want to be the villain," he confessed in a rare moment of vulnerability, his voice breaking. "But I'm scared. Scared of losing everything I thought was mine." And so, blinded by desperation and pain, Michael took a dangerous path, one that would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and the eventual destruction of the very family he once loved. David grew up in a modest neighborhood in Chicago, where life was simple but full of lessons. His mother, Maria, worked tirelessly at the local bakery, waking up before dawn to prepare dough and close shop late at night. David often watched her with admiration, seeing the sacrifices she made just to keep their small family afloat. He remembered how, as a child, he would help by delivering fresh bread to neighbors, the warmth of the bakery filling his heart. One particular memory stood out, a kind woman named Mrs. Thompson, the mother in our story. Mrs. Thompson wasn't just a neighbor, she was a beacon of kindness. David recalled the day when Maria had fallen ill, struggling to keep the bakery open. Mrs. Thompson had appeared at their door with a basket full of food and a reassuring smile. "You just focus on getting better," she had said softly, placing a warm hand on Maria's shoulder. "I'll help with the bakery until you're back on your feet." Young David watched how his mother's eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. From that day, Mrs. Thompson became like family to them, a friend who never judged or asked for anything in return. Years later, when David heard the news that Mrs. Thompson was in jail, accused unjustly, a heavy weight settled in his chest. He couldn't believe that the woman who had been such a light in his childhood was now trapped in darkness. Determined to help, David arranged to visit her in jail. As he sat across the cold metal table, he saw the fatigue and pain etched into her face. "Mrs. Thompson," he said gently, "I remember the kindness you showed my mother. I promise you I won't let this injustice stand. We will fight this together." Tears welled up in her eyes. David, I don't know how to thank you. I feel so lost, so betrayed. You're not alone anymore, he assured her. I'll do everything I can to bring you home. At that moment, his resolve deepened. David wasn't just fighting a legal battle, he was fighting for the family that had once taken care of his own. Every late night studying law, every case he worked on, led to this moment of reckoning. His passion wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. During a strategy meeting with his team, David spoke with fierce determination. We have forged signatures, manipulated documents, and false accusations to dismantle. This isn't just about winning a case, it's about restoring a life. One of his colleagues asked, "Do you think Mrs. Thompson is ready for this fight?" David smiled softly. "She's stronger than she knows. She just needs to believe in justice again." And that's what I'm here for. Behind the calm exterior, David's heart raced with hope and anxiety. He knew the road ahead was tough, but with every step, he was closer to bringing light back into Mrs. Thompson's life. His journey from a boy who learned the power of kindness to a lawyer ready to battle the darkest lies was now entwined with the story of the woman who once saved his family's hope. Emily had always been a quiet woman, her gentle nature often mistaken for weakness. But behind her soft smile and calm demeanor, she carried a heavy burden, a life trapped in the shadows of Michael's growing cruelty. At first, the changes were small. Sharp words, dismissive glances, the way he ignored her presence at family gatherings. But slowly, those cracks deepened into chasms. One evening, as she sat alone in the dim light of their kitchen, Emily whispered to herself, "How did it come to this? When did love turn into this cold silence?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly, refusing to let the sadness consume her. Michael's greed and bitterness weren't just about money, they were about control. He belittled her, made her feel invisible. Emily learned to speak less, to avoid his wrath, to live quietly beneath his shadow. Yet every night, as she lay awake, the question haunted her, "Is this really the life I want?" One afternoon, Emily found herself in the small park near their home, the cold breeze brushing against her face as she watched children play. Her phone buzzed, a message from a friend, "You deserve better. Don't be afraid to fight for yourself." For the first time in months, Emily allowed herself to hope. She sat down on a bench, her heart pounding, and whispered aloud, "I can't do this anymore. I have to be brave, for me." Later that week, she quietly packed her belongings. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches, just a steady resolve to reclaim her life. When Emily told Michael she was leaving, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for this family?" Emily met his gaze steadily, voice firm but calm. "You never saw me as part of this family. I'm done being invisible. It's time I live for myself." The days that followed were filled with legal meetings, the filing of divorce papers, and long nights of reflection. Emily wrestled with guilt and fear but held onto a growing strength. In a phone call with a close friend, she admitted, "It's terrifying to start over, but I'd rather face the unknown than live in this cage." Her friend's voice was warm and encouraging. "You're not alone, Emily. This is your chance to build the life you deserve." Slowly, Emily began to rebuild, finding a small apartment, enrolling in evening classes, and reconnecting with old friends. Each step was a victory, a reclaiming of her dignity and freedom. One morning, as sunlight poured through her new window, Emily smiled genuinely for the first time in years. "I'm not just surviving anymore," she said softly. "I'm living." The story teaches us many hard lessons about family, trust, and hope, lessons that touch the heart deeply. You see, family is supposed to be our safe place. The people who love us unconditionally, who stand by us through thick and thin. But sometimes, that safety is an illusion. The mother in this story never imagined that her own son, Michael, would betray her so cruelly. She said once, quietly, with tears in her eyes, I gave him everything, my trust, my home, my life's work. How could he do this to me? Her pain was raw, the kind that words cannot fully capture. It's a wound that runs deep because it's not just about losing money or property, it's about losing faith in those who were supposed to protect her. I thought family was forever, she whispered to David during a quiet moment. But sometimes, the ones closest to you are the ones who hurt you most. Yet in the darkest shadows, a spark of hope shines brightest. David's presence in her life became that spark. He reminded her, you are not alone in this fight. Justice will find its way. And his fierce determination gave her the strength to keep going, even when the road seemed impossible. The courtroom was a battlefield, not just of law, but of emotions. Every lie exposed felt like a punch to the gut, but every truth uncovered was a step toward healing. As David presented evidence, the mother sat tall, despite the tears. She said quietly, this isn't just about what's mine. It's about standing up for every betrayal, every injustice I've faced. Meanwhile, Emily, the daughter-in-law, found her voice too. After years of silent suffering, she told her mother one afternoon, I can't live like this anymore. I'm leaving for my own sake. It was a brave, painful decision. You deserve to be free, her mother replied, holding her hands tightly. This is your new beginning. And Michael? His fall was as heartbreaking as it was inevitable. On the streets where he once walked proudly, he now lay alone, a stranger to the world he tried to claim. One cold night, a passerby said, do you remember the home you fought to steal? Look where you've ended up. Michael could only stare silently, the weight of his choices crashing down. Through all this, the mother reflected often, I learned that trust must be given carefully, not blindly. Family is sacred, but so is self-respect. She looked at David and Emily one day and said, we can heal, but only if we're honest and strong. Betrayal breaks us, but hope rebuilds. The message here is clear. Life is full of pain and betrayal, yes, but also full of resilience, courage, and justice. When everything falls apart, we have a choice to surrender or to rise. Don't lose faith, David told her once. Justice will prevail. And so will you. Hope, Emily added softly, is the light that never goes out. And with those words, the mother knew her story was not just about loss, but about the power of forgiveness, strength, and moving forward with a heart open to new beginnings.